Witness took the stand late this afternoon in the retrial of Lyndon Wiggins. Wiggins is the alleged mastermind behind the murder of Twin Cities real estate agent Monique Bowe. Lou Raguse joins us live from the courthouse with the latest. Lou?
Elsa Segura was one of Lyndon Wiggins' girlfriends, and she played a key role in this crime. Last year, she pleaded guilty to kidnapping, admitting at her plea hearing that she placed the phone call to Monique Bowe to set up a phony house showing so that two men could kidnap Monique.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.
New Year's Eve, 2019. It should have been a night of celebration. The city of Minneapolis, alive with the promise of a fresh start, unaware that it was about to become the backdrop to a chilling and unspeakable tragedy. A tragedy that would claim the life of Monique Bowe, 28 years old, a mother of two, a rising star in the real estate world, an innocent woman who believed she was simply going to another show, another step in her journey. But what began as a simple job was transformed into a nightmare. A nightmare that would unravel the very fabric of trust in ways unimaginable. But how did it all begin? How did a woman, so full of promise, find herself in the grip of a Monique had always been diligent in her work. She was a mother, a professional, someone who believed in hard work and honesty. What she didn't know was that her trust would be exploited by those closest to her. She had no way of knowing that her next house showing, on the eve of a new year, would be her last. Who could have done this? Who was behind the mask of deception that took Monique's life? Enter Lyndon Wiggins, a man whose name would soon be synonymous with betrayal. A man with a personal vendetta, fueled by old grudges, who would stop at nothing to settle his score. Alongside him, Elsa Segura, an accomplice whose role in this twisted plot would be key. Together, they played their parts, manipulating Monique, leading her into a situation where she had no escape. But the question remains, why? What could Monique have possibly done to deserve this? Monique's boyfriend, JMM. Had once shared a bond with Wiggins. They worked together, but over time, that bond frayed. Their differences grew, culminating in a bitter falling out. And from that bitterness, a plot began to form. Wiggins, with his vengeful heart, sought retribution. He needed a way to get back at Monique's boyfriend, and he knew just how to do it. Monique would be the perfect target. She trusted him, trusted them all. But trust is fragile. And it only takes a moment for that trust to turn into something deadly. As Monique entered the house, expecting a simple showing, she walked straight into the hands of her captors. Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, two men with no regard for human life, had been waiting for her. They had one job, to carry out the final step in Wiggins' twisted plot. Monique was taken, bound, her hands and neck sealed with duct tape. The clock was ticking. The nightmare was just beginning. 2.5 hours. That's how long she would be in the back of that van. 2.5 hours of terror, of not knowing what awaited her next. But in that van, Monique had no choice. She was at the mercy of the people who had set her up, and the worst was yet to come. They drove her for hours, their destination unclear, their motives cold. But what was their endgame? Why kidnap Monique? Why take her life? As the van sped through the streets of Minneapolis, Monique's family, her children, were left at home, completely unaware of the horror unfolding just miles away. The end of Monique's life was drawing closer. But for those who loved her, the pain was only beginning. The story of betrayal was about to reach its breaking point. And in the final moments of Monique's life, there would be no escape. Monique Bowe never imagined that her next house showing would be her last. For a woman who dedicated her life to real estate, this was supposed to be just another opportunity, a chance to make a sale, help a family find their dream home, and secure a better future for her own children. But that night, something sinister was unfolding, one that would shatter her world and end her life. What appeared to be a routine workday, a simple house showing, was in fact, a calculated trap. A trap that would lead to her abduction, her life taken far too soon. It wasn't a random act. No, someone had been watching her. Someone who had planned everything down to the smallest detail. And the one who orchestrated it all. The mastermind behind this cruel plot was none other than Lyndon Wiggins. At the heart of this deception was Lyndon Wiggins, calculating, ruthless, and driven by a personal vendetta. His grudge against Monique's boyfriend had been brewing for some time. The two men, once connected through the music industry, had crossed paths in the past, but a falling out had created a rift between them. Wiggins, feeling slighted and betrayed, was about to turn that resentment into something far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. Monique's boyfriend, JMM, had once shared a bond with Wiggins. They worked together in the music business, but their relationship soured. The rift was personal, fueled by jealousy, rivalry, and resentment. Wiggins had his reasons for the falling out, but none of them justified what he would do next. He wanted revenge, and in his mind, Monique was the perfect pawn. She would be the one to bear the brunt of his anger. Elsa Segura, Wiggins' girlfriend, would play the role of the deceiver. A former probation officer, Segura knew how to manipulate people. She was cold, calculated, and willing to do whatever it took to help Wiggins carry out his plan. Posing as a woman named Lisa Pawlowski, Segura reached out to Monique, offering a house showing that would ultimately lead to her abduction. Monique had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. She trusted the system. She trusted that her business was legitimate, that her clients were real. When she arrived at the designated house, she expected to meet Lisa Pawlowski, a potential buyer. What she didn't know was that she was about to meet two men who had been waiting for her. Men who had no intention of buying a house. Men who had been sent to kidnap her and carry out a twisted plan designed by Wiggins. Everything was set in motion. Monique had no idea that her trust was being exploited, no idea that her life was hanging in the balance. All she knew was that she was about to meet a potential client. But for Wiggins and Segura, it was just the beginning. They had their sights on a far darker outcome, and they were prepared to see it through, no matter the cost. What seemed like a typical workday was quickly descending into something monstrous. Monique was about to walk into the hands of her captors, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, two men who had been hired to carry out the final step of Wiggins' plan. The house that Monique thought would be her next job was in fact, the last place she would ever be. Monique Baugh, an innocent woman, a mother, a daughter, lost to a web of deception, betrayal, and vengeance. What was meant to be a simple real estate showing was, in reality, the start of her nightmare. A nightmare that would unfold in the most chilling way possible. In the game of deception, Lyndon Wiggins wasn't alone. His accomplice, Elsa Segura, played her part with chilling precision. A former probation officer, Segura had the skills to manipulate people, to hide behind a false persona, and to trick even the most trusting into a web of lies. Posing as a potential homebuyer, she reached out to Monique Baugh, luring her into a meeting that would lead her down a path from which there would be no return. Elsa's role in this plan was pivotal. Her cold manipulation was the spark that would ignite Monique's downfall. With each word she spoke, Monique was drawn deeper into the trap. Segura's calm demeanor and practiced voice lured Monique into a false sense of security, and before she knew it, the deal was made. The trap had been set, and Monique, unknowingly, had stepped into it. Monique was unaware that every step she took, every decision she made that evening, was being manipulated. She thought she was just going to another house showing, another routine stop in her busy life. But nothing about that night would be routine. The moment she stepped into that house, everything changed. Monique's nightmare began the moment she stepped into that house. But it wasn't the home she was expecting. It was a trap, set by two men who had been waiting for her. Cedric Berry and Barry Davis. Men with no empathy, no hesitation. Their job was simple: capture Monique, and carry out a plan far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. They were the physical executioners of a scheme, and Monique's fate was sealed the moment she entered that door. For Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, this wasn't just a job, it was a mission. A cold, calculated operation carried out without remorse. They weren't strangers to violence. This was simply another task, another person to silence. They had no moral qualms, no hesitation. Their only task was to do Wiggins' bidding, to take Monique Baugh and make sure she didn't leave that house alive. As Monique opened the door to meet Lisa Pawlowski, she was greeted by two men she didn't recognize. Cedric Barry and Barry Davis. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The plan was already in motion. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. Monique's world, her sense of safety, crumbled as they grabbed her. She didn't scream. She didn't have time to. Before she could process what was happening, she was bound, her hands and neck wrapped in duct tape. They were swift, efficient. There would be no escape for her. Monique struggles, her heart racing as she tries to understand what's happening. Her breath quickens, but she's overpowered. The men drag her into the house, and the door slams shut behind her with a hollow sound that echoes in the silence of the street. Monique's initial confusion quickly turned to panic. But she was already too deep into the trap. She had no way of knowing that her trust had been shattered by someone she thought she could rely on. She was in the hands of people who had no intention of letting her go. The U-Haul van was ready, and the journey to her death had already begun. For 2.5 hours, Monique was at the mercy of her captors. The van rumbled on, the sound of tires against asphalt filling the air. Every bump in the road, every turn they took, was another moment of dread for Monique. She had no idea where they were taking her, only that she was moving farther and farther from the safety she once took for granted. As the minutes dragged on, Monique's fate was sealed. She could only imagine what was going through her mind during that ride. Would she make it out alive? Would her family ever know the truth about what happened that night? Her thoughts raced, but there was no escape. There was no one coming to save her. She was alone in that van, trapped by the very people who had orchestrated her demise. Monique's world turned into a blur of terror the moment she stepped inside that house. The warmth of a routine job, of meeting a new client, was ripped away in an instant. The reality of the situation hit her like a wave. The men who greeted her were not prospective buyers. They were strangers, and they weren't interested in homes. They were here for something far more evil. Bound and helpless, Monique's mind raced. What had happened to the woman who had arrived at that house just minutes ago? The confident, professional woman, who had worked tirelessly to provide for her children and build a career, was now facing a terrifying unknown. Her thoughts flashed to her children, to her family, to the life she had worked so hard to build. Was this the end? Was she going to survive this? For two men, Cedric Barry and Barry Davis, this was just another day. But for Monique, this was the moment everything changed. There was no escape. The cold steel of the gun pressed into her side was a constant reminder that she was at the mercy of two men with no regard for her life. Her fate hung in the balance, and for the next 2 hours, her world would be nothing but terror. Every second inside that van was another moment of helplessness. The world outside became a distant memory, and Monique's only reality was the confined space she was trapped in. The van rumbled on, its engine a constant hum in the background, but all Monique could hear was the pounding of her own heart. She didn't know where they were going, how long it would take, or even if she would make it out alive. The terror was overwhelming, suffocating. Each bump in the road, each turn, felt like it was leading her farther away from the life she had known. As Monique sat bound and helpless in the back of that van, her mind raced. What was happening to her? Why did this happen? She couldn't understand it. She thought she was just doing her job, showing a house, helping someone find a home. But now, everything she had known, everything she had worked for, was slipping through her fingers. In the silence of that van, she reflected on the life she was fighting to return to, the children she loved, the family that depended on her. But how could she fight her way back? What could she do against the cold calculation of those who had taken her? Monique's body trembled with the cold and fear. But it wasn't just the physical pain that threatened to break her, it was the emotional torment of not knowing what awaited her. The silence in that van was suffocating, a harsh contrast to the noise inside her head. She was desperate to understand why this was happening to her, to make sense of the twisted plot that had taken her life off course. But there were no answers, only more questions, questions that, in the end, would remain unanswered. For Monique, this wasn't just an abduction, it was the loss of everything she held dear. The family she cherished, the career she had worked so hard to build, the future she had dreamed of. In that van, Monique wasn't just fighting for her life, she was fighting for everything that could be ripped away from her in an instant. She was a mother, a daughter, a woman who deserved a future, but that future was slipping away as the van sped further into the unknown. Each mile that passed, each minute that dragged on, Monique was forced to confront the reality that she might not survive this. There was no escape, no rescue in sight. It was a horrifying truth, one that gnawed at her with every passing second. But still, she fought to hold on to the hope that somehow, someone, anyone, would come for her. But that hope was fading, like a flicker of light being swallowed by the dark. As the hours dragged on, Monique's mind was consumed by fear and confusion. She was trapped in that van, not knowing where it was heading, but feeling the weight of her impending doom press heavily on her. With each mile, each turn of the wheel, she realized her life was slipping away from her. Her body screamed for mercy, but her captors showed none. The van rumbled on, and with it, Monique's hope grew dimmer with each passing second. She had no idea what awaited her at the end of this road, but she knew it would be nothing short of terrifying. With each mile, Monique's nightmare grew worse. The men who had taken her weren't interested in negotiating. They weren't interested in anything other than completing their twisted plan. They had no remorse. No second thoughts. Their destination was clear, and it would be the final stop in Monique's life. At some point, Monique must have realized that there was no escape. There was no one coming to save her. Her life, once full of hope, now hung in the balance. The reality of her situation was inescapable. The cold alley where she would take her last breaths was now her final reality. But even in those final moments, Monique fought. She fought to live. She fought for the children she loved. She fought for the future she would never see. Monique struggled, but it was too late. She had no way of knowing if anyone would hear her cries, if anyone would come to save her. The men had no hesitation. They were there to end her life, and that was exactly what they were going to do. She was helpless in that moment, her body weak from hours of fear and restraint. There was no escape. No way out. The silence that followed the gunshots was deafening. Monique Ball was gone. Her life, her hopes, her dreams, all snuffed out in a cold alleyway, abandoned by the people who had lured her there. Her family, her children, none of them would ever see her again. They were left to pick up the pieces of a tragedy that could never be undone. Monique's family was shattered. Her children were left motherless, her partner heartbroken, her family destroyed. The grief was overwhelming, each family member struggling to process the horror that had unfolded. But the pain didn't stop there. It was only just beginning. The search for justice was about to start, and for Monique's family, that journey would be just as painful as the loss of their beloved one. Monique's family was left to deal with the aftermath. The emotional toll was beyond anything they had ever imagined. Her children, young and full of promise, would never see their mother again. The pain was raw, overwhelming, a constant ache that never went away. And for her family, the question remained, why? Why was Monique taken from them? What had she done to deserve such a brutal and senseless end? For those who loved Monique, there would be no moving on. Her death left a wound that would never heal. The man responsible, the men who executed the plan, would they ever be held accountable? Would justice prevail? These questions hung in the air, unanswered, as her family struggled to find peace amidst the chaos of loss. For nearly 6 years, Monique Baugh's family fought for justice. They fought to see her killers held accountable, to ensure that the pain of losing a daughter, a sister, and a mother wouldn't be forgotten. But the legal journey they were about to undertake would be anything but simple. The road to justice was long and fraught with obstacles. The conviction of Monique's killers brought some sense of closure, but for her family, the relief they had hoped for was bittersweet. Elsa Segura had played a pivotal role in Monique's death, her manipulation, her deceit, her willingness to betray the trust of a woman she barely knew, yet, somehow, Segura had been allowed to plea bargain, securing a drastically reduced sentence. A former probation officer, Segura was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a far cry from the life sentence she deserved. For Monique's family, this was a slap in the face. Lucille's words echoed the sentiments of the entire family. For them, the legal system had failed to fully acknowledge the gravity of Segura's role in this crime. While Monique's killers were behind bars, the family's sense of justice was incomplete. For them, the sentence handed to Segura felt like a betrayal, her reduced sentence a reminder that the pain she caused could not be undone. After a series of legal twists and turns, Lyndon Wiggins was about to face justice. His retrial marked a crucial moment for Monique's family. They had fought for this day, for the opportunity to ensure the man who masterminded Monique's abduction and murder would be held accountable for his actions. This was no longer just a fight for a conviction, it was a fight for justice, for Monique, for her children, and for a sense of closure that had long been out of reach. Wiggins had orchestrated every step of Monique's death. His plan had been methodical, his execution cold. He had used Monique's trust to lead her into a trap, and now he was sitting in a courtroom, facing the consequences of his actions. His role in Monique's death was clear, and the prosecution was determined to ensure that justice would be served. For Monique's family, the trial was more than just a legal process, it was an emotional roller coaster. Every witness who testified, every detail that was revealed, brought them closer to the truth, but also dredged up the pain they had been forced to carry for so long. The decision was in the hands of the jury. Would they bring Monique's family the justice they had waited so long for? November 13, 2025, Wiggins was sentenced to life in prison. The verdict brought a sense of justice, but for Monique's family, the relief was bittersweet. The man who had masterminded her death would never see the light of day again, but that didn't bring Monique back. It didn't erase the pain, the years of waiting, or the loss of a mother, a daughter, a sister. But for the first time in a long time, Monique's family could finally feel as though justice had been served. Monique's family would never fully recover from the loss. Her children would grow up without the woman who had given them everything. But the conviction of Wiggins, and the closure that came with it, brought some sense of peace. It didn't heal the wounds, but it offered them a glimpse of justice, a step toward healing, and a small victory in a fight that had lasted far too long. For Monique Baugh's family, the battle was over, but the scars would remain. The fight for justice had been long and painful, but in the end, it was a victory for Monique. A victory for her children. A victory for the memory of a woman who deserved so much more than the fate she met. The fight for justice may have been won, but the emotional toll would be felt forever. Monique Baugh's life was taken too soon. In the blink of an eye, she was gone, her dreams unfulfilled, her future erased. But Monique's memory, her love, and her spirit continue to live on in the hearts of those who loved her. Her family's fight for justice didn't just end with the conviction of her killers. No, for Monique's family, the real battle was one that would last a lifetime, the battle to hold on to her memory, to honor the woman she was, and to make sure her legacy was never forgotten. Monique's children, now older, carry the burden of their mother's absence every day. They were just children when Monique was taken from them, and now, as they grow, they are left to navigate the world without her. The emotional toll on them is immeasurable. They didn't just lose a mother. They lost their sense of security, their foundation. They lost the one person who loved them unconditionally, who would have fought for them no matter what. And while the justice system has held the men who took her life accountable, the emotional scars they've left will stay with her children forever. For Lyndon Wiggins, this was the moment he had been dreading, the moment where he would be forced to face the consequences of his actions. After years of legal wrangling, after a previous conviction that was overturned due to a mistake in the jury instructions, Wiggins finally stood trial for the murder of Monique Ball. This time, the stakes were higher. The truth was undeniable. The evidence was damning. For Monique's family, this trial was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for her legacy. They had fought for years to make sure that those responsible for her death were held accountable. But the emotional cost of those years, waiting, hoping, praying for justice, had been unbearable. Now, as the trial neared its conclusion, they could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. The man who had orchestrated Monique's murder was about to be sentenced. And for them, the weight of that moment was heavy with emotion. On November 13, 2025, the final chapter in Monique Ball's murder case was written. Lyndon Wiggins was sentenced to life in prison. The courtroom, once filled with tension, now held a bittersweet silence. For Monique's family, the conviction brought a sense of closure, but it could never undo the damage done. Monique was gone, and no amount of justice could bring her back. But for the first time in years, Monique's family could look toward the future with some measure of peace. Monique Ball's life was stolen far too soon. But in the hearts of those who loved her, her memory lives on. Her family, though forever marked by loss, has found the strength to continue on without her. The battle for justice has been won, but the fight to heal will take much longer. For Monique's family, the road to healing is just beginning. And even though they will never forget the pain, they carry her memory with them, her legacy, forever.
Welcome to Shocking True Crime. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily updates on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe.